The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Meister Eckhart begins with a thought that turns our usual way of seeing around. What if the search for God does not begin somewhere far beyond us? Imagine that God is not merely beyond the stars, waiting to be reached. Eckhart turns the gaze inward, not because God is a hidden piece of us, but because the human soul can become a place of encounter, not in the noise of our thoughts, and not in the images we keep making. Deeper than that, Eckhart speaks of a stillness we can barely name, a place where the mind no longer tries to hold everything in its hands. His path does not simply give us more answers. It leads towards a harder question. Who are you when you let go of everything you have learned to defend as yourself? Your roles, your image, your need to be certain. Eckhart returns again and again to a demanding thought. The soul must become free and empty enough for God to work in it. Emptiness, for him, is not failure. It is an openness that no longer tries to control what comes. Only what is open can receive. Only what becomes quiet can truly listen. Yet our lives move in the opposite direction. We fill silence with noise and define ourselves through roles, opinions, plans, and expectations. But what if the deepest part of you is not something you have to construct at all? What if it becomes clearer when the noise recedes, when the masks loosen, and when you no longer have to prove who you are? This emptiness is not cold, and it is not a fall into nothingness. It is the space of receiving. So if part of your life feels hollow, do not rush to fill it at once. Not every emptiness is an ending. Some may be a beginning. Eckhart speaks of a hidden depth in the soul, a ground that ordinary thought cannot simply enter and inspect. His language is daring, but the direction is clear. God is not an object that the mind can place in front of itself. No image can contain him. No concept can exhaust him. Our words may point towards God, but the moment we confuse the sign with the reality, the sign becomes a veil. This is why Eckhart's language so often moves towards silence. This encounter is not produced by a method. It may happen in prayer, in stillness, in a moment when the restless self loosens its grip. Not as a spectacle, but as a recognition that reaches deeper than our usual stream of thought. The point is not that God becomes a secret possession inside us. The soul becomes receptive to what it did not create. We do not manufacture the light. We stop placing ourselves in front of it and learn how to receive. Eckhart says, God is a God of the present. As he finds you, so he receives you. The way towards God does not begin in some perfect future version of your life. It begins here, in the life you are actually living. We are often everywhere except here. We move through appointments, tasks, memories, and imagined futures. We live between what happened yesterday and what may happen tomorrow, while the present quietly slips through our hands. But life never happens yesterday or tomorrow. It happens now. And for Eckhart, God is not waiting at the end of a spiritual journey, as though we first had to become different people before we could turn towards him. This presence is not a technique for creating a special state. It grows when we stop fleeing the ordinary moment and meet what is before us. A person, a task, a silence. Perhaps the deepest spirituality begins by being truly here. Eckhart gives us one of his boldest lines. "I pray God to rid me of God." It sounds almost impossible. Yet he is not asking to be freed from God himself. He is asking to be freed from the God his own mind has reduced to an image. We all carry images of God, a judge, a protector, a distant power, a source of comfort. Some come from faith, some from fear, some from childhood. They may help us, but no image and no concept can ever be God himself. The danger begins when the image becomes absolute. Then we no longer approach God. We defend our idea of God. Eckhart asks us to loosen even our holiest concepts when we begin to mistake our understanding for the mystery itself. This is why his mysticism can feel unsettling. He removes the supports until the soul stands before a mystery it cannot control. Perhaps faith becomes deeper there, when we stop demanding that God fit the shape our mind prepared. Eckhart's path eventually reaches the self that wants to possess everything, even spiritual things. We can seek peace, insight, and closeness to God, yet still carry the same hidden question inside us. What will I get from this? The ego is not only loud pride. It can be quiet, wounded, and devout. It can turn prayer into a bargain, goodness into a performance, and spiritual experience into another way of proving that we are special. Eckhart calls us towards an inner dying, but not towards contempt for life. What must die is the constant need to make everything serve the self, the need to possess, to shine, to be confirmed, to remain at the center. Freedom begins when that grip loosens. The person does not disappear, and responsibility does not disappear. What changes is the need to turn every experience into proof of our worth or into something we can own. For Eckhart, love is more than an emotion that rises and falls. It is a movement away from possession. Love does not become deeper by gripping more tightly. It becomes clearer when it no longer asks to own what it loves. We know another kind of love very well. I give, but I keep count. I stay, but I expect something back. I forgive, but I remember the debt. I care, while part of me still asks whether the other person has noticed enough. Eckhart's movement is more radical. Love gives without making itself the center of the gift. That does not mean accepting abuse or abandoning truth. It means that love is no longer merely a transaction between two demands. Perhaps the deepest change is not that we finally find love as though it were an object. Perhaps it begins when we stop blocking it with fear, possession, and calculation, and allow love to become something we actually do. What can a mystic from the 13th and 14th centuries say to a person living now? More than we might expect. We live surrounded by speed, distraction, comparison, and noise, and much of that noise continues inside us. Eckhart does not offer another system for optimizing the self. He calls us towards emptiness, attention, and inner freedom, not away from responsibility, but away from the endless attempt to secure ourselves through more. When we stop grasping for one more answer, one more image, one more proof, something can become quiet. We do not force God to appear. we become more receptive to a presence that was never ours to manufacture. And from that depth, the path returns to the world, to the person before us, to the work that is ours to do, to love that does not need to advertise itself. Depth is not an escape from life. It changes the way we enter it. Meister Eckhart is not simply a teaching to memorize. His words are a call into the depth of the soul. And the path is not easy, because it asks us to release what we usually cling to most tightly: our images, our control, ourselves. But where the grip loosens, something opens. The soul can become more receptive, not empty of life, love, or responsibility, but empty of the need to possess them, display them, or turn them into proof of our own importance. Perhaps that is the wonder Eckhart keeps pointing towards. God is not another object for us to acquire. The deepest encounter begins when the self becomes quiet enough to receive what it could never create by its own power. And perhaps the aim of mysticism is not to collect extraordinary experiences, but to become more truthful before God, to see without possessing, to love without calculating.